Most drivers believe the expensive part of a traffic stop is the ticket itself. They imagine the fine, maybe a few points on their license, and then life moves on. But what many people don't realize is that a simple roadside conversation can quietly snowball into something far more expensive. One mistake during those few minutes on the shoulder of the road can lead to fines, court costs, insurance increases, and penalties that easily cross the $1,000 mark. Let me ask you something before we go any further. The last time you were pulled over, or if you imagine it happening tonight, what would be the very first thing you would say when the officer reaches your window? Think about that honestly. Would you apologize immediately? Would you start explaining what happened? Would you ask why you were stopped? I want you to share your answer in the comments because this moment is where many drivers unknowingly make decisions that affect the entire stop. Most people think they're helping themselves by talking quickly and explaining everything. But the reality is often the opposite. And once you understand how these encounters actually work, you'll start seeing why so many drivers accidentally walk away from a traffic stop with a much bigger problem than they expected. Picture a completely normal drive. Maybe it's late afternoon traffic. Maybe it's a quiet evening road. Everything feels routine until you notice a patrol car somewhere behind you. At first, it's just another vehicle in the flow of traffic. Then you glance in the mirror again and the lights suddenly flash. Your mind immediately goes into detective mode. You replay the last few moments of driving. Did I change lanes without signaling? Was I going too fast? Did I miss a stop sign back there? You pull over, the engine goes quiet, and there's a short moment where everything feels strangely still. In those few seconds before the officer approaches, most drivers are already planning what they're going to say. That's the first legal secret many people never realize. The traffic stop hasn't even started yet, and the driver is already preparing to talk themselves into trouble. When the officer reaches the window, the conversation often begins with a question that sounds completely ordinary. Do you know why I stopped you? Drivers hear this and immediately feel pressure to respond. Silence feels uncomfortable. Many people assume that being cooperative means offering an explanation right away, so they say something like, "I'm sorry, officer, I might have been going a little fast." That single sentence might feel polite, but legally, it can function as an admission. You've confirmed the violation before the officer even explains what they observed. Now here's the important part. Not every officer is looking for a confession. Many traffic stops are simple and routine. But when a driver admits to a violation voluntarily, it removes any uncertainty about what happened. From the officer's perspective, the situation just became very straightforward. But imagine a slightly different scenario. The officer asks that same question and the driver responds calmly, "I'm not sure, officer." That answer doesn't argue. It doesn't accuse. It doesn't admit anything. It simply allows the officer to explain the reason for the stop. And that's where the second legal secret appears. The driver who listens first usually understands the situation better than the driver who talks first. When the officer explains the reason for the stop, the conversation now has a clear direction. Maybe it was speeding. Maybe a brake light isn't working. Maybe the officer believed a traffic rule was violated. At this stage, most officers will ask for 3 things that drivers in the United States are required to provide: a driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. These documents are part of the legal responsibility of operating a vehicle on public roads. Providing them calmly and without argument helps keep the interaction simple. But the conversation rarely stops there. Officers sometimes ask additional questions that feel casual, but can influence how the stop develops. Where are you coming from tonight? Where are you headed? Is this your vehicle? Most drivers answer immediately and often provide more detail than necessary. They begin describing their entire evening, mentioning where they were, who they were with, and what they were doing before getting on the road. This is another moment where small decisions can quietly change the situation. Imagine a driver casually mentioning that they had dinner with friends and enjoyed a drink earlier. Even if that drink happened hours ago, the officer may now feel obligated to investigate further. Suddenly, the traffic stop may involve additional questions or even sobriety testing. What began as a simple traffic violation has now become a much longer encounter. This doesn't mean the officer is doing anything wrong. Officers are trained to pay attention to information that could indicate a safety issue. But the information often comes directly from the driver. Another important detail most people never think about is how carefully officers observe behavior during traffic stops. They notice how quickly you respond. They notice whether your hands are visible. They watch how passengers behave in the vehicle. Even something as simple as fumbling through a glove compartment can make a driver appear more nervous than they actually are. And nervousness is incredibly common during traffic stops. Even drivers who have done nothing wrong feel anxious in that moment. The key is to keep your actions slow, calm, and predictable. Place your hands where they can be seen, retrieve documents when asked, and avoid sudden movements. These small details help create an atmosphere where the stop remains routine rather than tense. Now here's another legal point that surprises many drivers. Sometimes officers ask for permission to search the vehicle. The request may sound friendly or casual. Mind if I take a quick look inside the car? Many drivers assume they must say yes. They worry that refusing will make them appear guilty. But in many situations, drivers have the right to decline a voluntary search. Politely stating that you do not consent is not illegal and does not automatically mean the officer can proceed with the search. Of course, if an officer has probable cause to believe evidence of a crime is present, they may still conduct a search under certain circumstances. But voluntary consent removes that legal question entirely. Understanding this difference is one of the reasons legal experts often advise drivers to think carefully before agreeing to searches. Again, this is not about being confrontational. It's about understanding your rights and responsibilities. Another situation where drivers lose money unnecessarily involves arguing during the stop. When emotions rise, some drivers begin debating the officer about the violation right there on the roadside. But the shoulder of the highway is rarely the place where those debates are resolved. Traffic disputes are typically handled in court, not beside a patrol car with cars speeding past a few feet away. Drivers who remain calm and respectful often finish the encounter much faster than those who try to challenge every detail in the moment. One final point many people overlook involves the end of the stop itself. After returning your documents, the officer may explain whether you're receiving a warning or a citation. If a ticket is issued, some drivers feel tempted to argue again or refuse to sign. But signing a citation usually does not mean you are admitting guilt. In most states, it simply confirms that you received the ticket and understand the next steps. The actual decision about guilt or innocence happens later if the case goes to court. Understanding that process can prevent drivers from escalating a simple situation unnecessarily. When you step back and look at the entire process, traffic stops follow a surprisingly predictable pattern. The officer observes a violation, initiates the stop, confirms the driver's identity, and decides whether to issue a warning or citation. But within that pattern, the driver's behavior plays a significant role in how smoothly things go. Drivers who stay calm, provide required documents, avoid unnecessary admissions, and keep their responses simple often experience the quickest and least expensive outcomes. Drivers who panic, talk excessively, or argue on the roadside sometimes create complications that lead to larger penalties. That's why the real legal secret isn't a clever phrase or a trick to escape responsibility. The real secret is understanding how the interaction works and choosing your words carefully in those few minutes on the side of the road. Because sometimes the difference between a routine warning and a $1,000 problem isn't the violation itself. Sometimes it's simply how the conversation unfolded after the lights came on.